Thank you. So, first of all, just to give you a background within DevOps and the definition, and this may be new to people, it may be old to people, but a lot of times, especially in industries, they, as executives look at things, they say, okay, we hear DevOps is a good thing, let's set up a department, well, or a tool and such. And really, it's important that we start with definition. DevOps is not a tool. It's a collaboration. It's a mindset. It's working together. It's a methodology that mounts two different types of roles: application development and operations, and ultimately to be in alignment with that common goal. And even when you look at it, application development can even be broken down to programming, testing, release management, and support. So think about that when you're really looking at what DevOps really means. It's development and delivery and operations. And when you look at the objective, there's a number of reasons that people look at DevOps and why it's important, but ultimately clients, customers are having higher and higher demands about capabilities and innovation. So the pressure to release software more quickly, more frequently, and frankly, with higher quality is almost becomes a checkbox. You need to do that well and do it quickly. And the reason infrastructure is part of that is because it's not just the hardware. It could be virtual servers. It could be situations where you have cloud solutions, and you could be global. Some of the things that are important, and this is information we've gathered from our research, so understand this isn't coming from CI, this is industry specs that come out, and what is important. So why are people being led and driven to DevOps? And the number one reason is collaboration between development and operations. And as you look down that information, simultaneous deployment, pressures from the business to release quickly, customer experience, you see the key drivers. And what's most important when you look at it is it's not necessarily a need to reduce costs, and we'll get into that a little bit later in the conversation. If you're looking at DevOps as your cost savings or driver, that's probably not the way to look at it. Certainly that is a factor in efficiency gains, but we'll talk that through later. People ask, what is the value? Well, what's important is you have to look at the levers, as I call them. And in the case of DevOps, it's very important that everyone understands that you have to be agile or agile-like to really incorporate DevOps. If people sit there and say that they are completely a waterfall shop and trying to implement DevOps, you really got to look at what problem are you trying to solve. Because when you get into DevOps value, it's really relying on key agile approaches like more frequent deployments, faster lead times, more reliability and change success, so when you have key things that you need to do, and certainly when there are problems, the ability to recover quickly. And then obviously more competitiveness. So your market share, higher growth, looking at your industry, your needs. Those are the key things. And that's what the focus would be here. And really the takeaway I want to make sure everyone understands is, certainly we're talking about value here, but you just can't say that you're going to be DevOps without incorporating some type of agile approaches. It doesn't mean you have to be enterprise agile, but you have to incorporate that. When you look at the industry, and this is a important chart that we look at, And you look at by survey, who are the high performers, the medium, low performers, and look at the survey questions. So deployment frequency is a critical lever in measurement. On demand, multiple deployments during the day, per day. Lead time changes, the ability to quickly change and move effectively. Mean time to recover, to be able to restore a service or an outage. And change failure rate, those are the quality, right? To be able to make sure that there's high quality, low failure rate. Those are the key measurements that people are looked at to measure how you're doing from a DevOps perspective. And I'm going to go back to the first one, deployment frequency. That by definition indicates an agile-like work to be able to release software quickly. I think it's important also to look at traditional operations versus DevOps. And this chart shows, and it's a numeric scale of comparison. And you can look at when you're deploying changes from a traditional sense to a DevOps, you'll see that app dragging configuration is a higher reliability versus just deploying changes from a DevOps approach. Automating, that's a real key component there. You can notice how DevOps completely is oriented to doing that. So their takeaway right there is showing that automation is a critical component of DevOps. And that's not just automated testing, that's automation of the infrastructure, automation of the code, and automated testing. We call that full stack DevOps. Infrastructure management versus IT ops has less of an emphasis because it's more about those traditional stacks and mainframes and such. So just kind of going down the list, I don't need to read to you, but look at all the things that are DevOps oriented. I like to look at things like firefighting. You don't have that when you have a DevOps oriented compared to traditional IT. You're not changing on the fly and stuck with a critical situation. You have procedures in place. Self-improvement. You're always looking at ways to do things better. And we're going to get to it in a minute to even talk about some of the tools. There's not a single tool that's going to solve your DevOps. They're always out there. And that's how things have changed, right? It used to be you had only a couple different vendors and you had to make an enterprise decision. Well, now there are vendors that are software as a service. There are vendors that have that enterprise solution. And frankly, there's open source types of solutions. Before we go any further, I want to discuss a little bit of how we got here, right? And talk about that. And I did allude to it earlier in the discussion. It started with the waterfall methodology, right? It's been for years. And the reasons waterfall steps, right? You have requirements, design, development, quality, and it goes in full circle. And even on the best days of waterfall, your release cycle may be 2 months, 3 months, but in reality, it's 6 to 9 months. If you're doing waterfall and you're able to effectively release monthly, I would suggest you're probably doing some type of iterative approach or agile-like. Reviewing, going back and understanding agile methodology, and as you remember, we discussed, you really can't be DevOps unless you incorporate an agile approach and methodology. And this is a typical methodology that you may be familiar with, where you're grooming